So welcome everyone. Happy International Women's Day. This is very exciting for us because we're a women-led company at Trova.Health, and we celebrate the passion and the drive and the resilience and courage of women all around the world. We think that the world is carried on our backs. So we're grateful for the chance to meet with everybody on this important topic. As we all know, it's very difficult for especially the youth right now, whether even if they're in their own home country, but particularly as they live abroad. And parents, of course, carry that struggle with them, particularly when they're not feeling happy and settled. And that can be really difficult for not only just the kid or the youth, but also for the family at large, because obviously everything affects each other. So just to give you a quick introduction of Trova.Health, and then we'll get to our expert, who is the one you all came to see. I'm Dana Allison. I'm the CEO of Trova.Health. At Trova, we are dedicated really to significantly improving the quality of life for people who work, live, and study abroad. And we do that by providing access to personalized and empowered network of mental and physical health experts and services who know particularly what it's like to live abroad. So there's lots of digital health apps out there that people can access, but we knew that there was a hole in meeting the needs of people as they live abroad and live outside of their networks. And so we believe that these borders shouldn't limit your access to quality physical and mental care. So that's why we exist. It's for you. And for people around you to really get the support that they need from experts who understand what it's like to live abroad. And speaking of which, Megan Norton, who is our expert today, she has lived abroad. I'll let her get into that a little bit more. Very exciting childhood. And she, as a result, took that into her professional life. She's an adult third culture kid, 10 countries, 5 US states, all of them considered home to her. And so she fully understands the challenges that come while moving globally as a child, particularly. And children are resilient, but it can be hard for them, obviously. So her sessions through Trova.Health specialize in supporting the families who are transitioning globally, and particularly helping children and teens find the solutions as they make these global transitions and adapt to these important changes. So I will turn the time over to Megan. She is, I'm very excited to hear from her. As I said, this is a problem we've all been facing. And just again, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A. You can do it anonymously or not, or you can put questions through chat and we will answer them as we go and or at the end. Over to you, Megan.
Thanks so much, Dana. It's really an honor to be speaking with Trova.Health today on International Women's Day. I want to acknowledge the resilient, brave, courageous women who have shaped and influenced my life, and also brave, resilient, courageous women that are around the world right now, especially in these difficult times. And so I hope the discussion points discussed here, some of the principles will be shared far and wide because we're seeing mass mobility in very different ways, sometimes traumatic ways. And so my heart, my energy is for those courageous and brave women who are moving right now. As Dana said, I am a third culture kid, and I want to define that so we have a understanding of the parameters I'm talking about. The traditional definition of a third culture kid, I'll be using that acronym TCK, is an individual who has spent their developmental years outside of their passport country or countries, typically because of their parents' work. And so I consider myself a third culture kid because I was a diplomat dependent and we moved every 3 years to a different country. And as an adult third culture kid, I've lived in 4 more countries. So these heart homes, I call them, my heart homes and that I'm home full include the US, South Africa, South Korea, Germany, Japan, Israel, Austria, Greece, Hungary, and Poland. And I'm currently based in the US, in Michigan, but I find tremendous meaning in my work because I connect with families, with parents, with teens, with other TCKs on a daily basis. And so I feel like I'm local here, but I'm very global. I see that we have South Africa here in our virtual room. We have Malawi, very, very cool. We're here in an international community virtually. And I think that's so powerful of Trova.Health and the power of virtual communities. So thank you for being here. And I want to also say that in my discussion today, I'll be talking about naming, normalizing, and networking with other TCKs, with other globally mobile families, that I think that the mental health portion of this is so important to acknowledge, and that this is a very personalized matter as well. So with the principles or the discussion points I put out, I'd love for you to contextualize it to your family, to your values. Every family has a different dynamic or needs. So I don't want to be prescriptive in what I say, but just say that I don't tell parents how to parent, but I tell them what TCKs need, and that this is very difficult work to shepherd TCKs. We're dealing with heavy topics, with anxiety, with loss, with grief, and so I want to acknowledge that and affirm that this is what this topic is all about in terms of the challenges and benefits. So I'm going to invite you to use the chat box throughout. For the people who are watching this later, I'll read off what some of the things people are saying so that you feel engaged. And the first bucket I want to talk about is naming. So I've defined third culture kids as individuals who have spent their developmental years outside of their passport country or countries. And naming TCKs can be very liberating for individuals to understand that, oh, I'm not completely unique. There are other people who have had this shared upbringing or shared experiences. Not that they are exactly the same experiences, but it's that high mobility piece. It's those cross-cultural experiences that can be very healing to somebody to understand this this profile. And so I think it's important to name third culture kids, but also to name that they are not only TCKs, they're not only third culture kids. This is not the whole part of their identity. Just like we have multiple roles, I would dare say identities in being like sisters or daughters. We're hikers, we're bikers, we're Zumba teachers, we're humanitarians, we're advocates. All those different names and roles are important also to introduce into the TCK vocabulary, for them to name, who are you besides being a TCK? This can be, I'm a son, a daughter, I'm an artist, I'm a gamer. So how would you also describe yourself? Let's go ahead and use the chat box. How would you name who you are in different roles and different capacities? And how would you describe TCKs as well? Go ahead and name what you would say are parts of the multidimensional human being, of personhood. It's more than just being a TCK. Once you name and you have that language, it's important to normalize. And so normalizing starts, I would say, with a place of similarity, finding commonality. So another way to help TCKs understand who they are, what they need, is to understand that they're not terminally unique. We all have shared humanity. We can have shared experiences. And I think it's important for us to understand that third culture kid is a subset of the umbrella term cross-cultural kid. Cross-cultural kid can be immigrants, binational, it can be refugees, it can be even domestic TCKs who not necessarily leave their home country, but are moving to different places within the country. And having that awareness and recognition can help TCKs to normalize that, oh, my experience is not the only one in the world where I have this high mobility piece. I think we also have to normalize for TCKs the both and of this kind of profile. There's so much complexity and nuance when it comes to the expat, the globally mobile experience. And we need to process this and affirm this in TCKs, that it's not going to be all great and it's not going to be all bad. There are many benefits and celebrations of TCKs, and there are also several challenges. In the chat box, go ahead and put what you've observed, perhaps in your community, in your networks of expats, of globally mobile people. What are some of the benefits and challenges? It's a both and. So some of the benefits and challenges, I like to, benefits and celebrations, I like to name and normalize for TCKs is that they have incredible soft skills. And increasingly in our world, we need people with soft skills. And so championing that, really normalizing and highlighting that in TCKs can give them the confidence that, yes, my ability to see different perspectives, my ability to have an expanded worldview is really critical in community building. Multilingualism, yes, open-minded, empathetic, absolutely. One of my parents, she said, my kids, my third culture kids can make friends with a wall. I mean, you just have this natural, I would say natural, it's learned, it's practiced to lean into discomfort to make connections. TCKs are flexible, they welcome change, they take risks, and they've normalized that this is part of who they are because they've had to adapt. They've been in uncomfortable situations. And so really, I think it's important to normalize these skills, normalize this in conversation, celebrate it, point it out. Challenges are also part of this profile. Again, it's a bit paradoxical that there are all these amazing qualities and characteristics for TCKs, and also we have to acknowledge, we have to process through the identity piece, where it can be a struggle to understand, who am I? If I'm continually adapting, who am I? If I have multiple places of belonging, where is home? There's sometimes also the fear of looking different in TCKs. Where is home? Alicia put not wanting to invest deep in relationships. Yes, relational loss can be a pattern with so much high mobility or with friends leaving. So we can bucket this into loss and grief. And so how do we address normalizing? How do we address naming these things? We can normalize and name by equipping ourselves with language. Again, understanding the TCK profile, understanding the CCK profile, but also understanding emotional vocabulary, understanding from different points of view and different disciplines what it can mean to support mental and emotional health. And this can be doing some research as a caretaker, as a parent, as a mentor. How do you model this yourself first? I think it's really important for TCKs to hear it and to see it modeled. When it's a tough time, when the news is constantly showcasing really difficult and traumatic events, it's important to say, this is tough. This is really a terrible time. I'm feeling this way. So model the feeling of with the emotional vocabulary. You can say, I'm really upset. Sometimes I find that TCK's emotional language is I'm happy, sad, mad. Really break down what happy, sad, and mad mean. When there's anger, usually anger is a result of a primary emotion of hurt or fear. So digging into like, why are they reacting this way, or why am I reacting this way? So equipping yourself with that knowledge. Also, no one's perfect, right? When we're modeling how to self-care, how to process emotions. And I think it's really important for us to be authentic and vulnerable, saying like, oh man, I really messed up and I need a do-over. If I'm sorry is not part of your family culture, then acknowledge it in a different way. Like, let's start over. So really, I think taking that initiative and normalizing, let's talk through these things. Even if you say like, you know what, I'm not okay right now, but I will be. It's important to show like we in this family, in this culture, we acknowledge the both ands. Like this is an uncomfortable feeling, but we're going to work through it. So first is equipping knowledge, modeling it, and then also I would say creating that space and a collaborative space for listening. And this is the invitation to let the TCK really go through their own emotions of, you know, this is a hard time for me. And when you create that space, it's important as a mentor, as a guide, to not downplay or to compete with emotions. The role is to listen. So in this point, it's not to say anything. Some parents, some families will process and create this space in different ways. Some get very intimidated with like face to face, like around the dinner table, like how do you feel, or how does this make you feel? So there's not one right way to process mental emotional health and well-being. It can be that you go for a walk, that you process on a hike. It could be that you're in a car ride. Sometimes that side-by-side feeling is less intimidating for especially like a teen who doesn't want to make eye contact when they're talking about their emotions. I know families who have a puzzle out on in a central location in the house, and you'll just start talking about daily things, debriefing while you're creating this puzzle together. The important thing is to understand what is good and healthy and inviting for your family to do this. There's so much loss, again, with TCKs, with emotional, with relational, with place belonging. And so verbally or even like artistically processing is healthy, and it will reduce unresolved grief in the future. This leads to networking. So normalizing, right? The both and, naming what the both and is, and then networking is really important, I think, as people who care for third culture kids, care for expat families, care for families coming into your community. I want this on a bumper sticker: don't go through life alone. When I work with teens, I always say that don't move through life alone. And so again, like I said earlier with naming, when we talk about who we are, when we think about all our different roles in different areas of our lives, I mean, maybe we're a baker, maybe we're a painter. Think about how you move in and out of different spaces and what gives you inspiration, what gives you hope, what challenges you. So taking stock of your own communities can help you then realize, all right, what are the communities my kids are exposed to or integrated in? It's so important to have community who understands our globally mobile lifestyle. So not only, our friends back in our passport country or family back in our passport country, I think it's really important to find communities of care who have walked in our shoes before, either as a TCK or as an expat or as somebody who has spent some time overseas, so that they can really understand those emotions and that frame of reference. The other important part of starting with you to understand your communities is to understand like who encourages you. If you think about when the flight attendants, before takeoff, they say if cabin pressure dips, the mask, oxygen mask will fall, and they always instruct you to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. And that's very applicable, I think, as you advocate for your TCKs is, again, how are you self-caring? How are you filling up your cup to be able to pour into others? And then just as today is International Women's Day, I think about the women in my life who have acknowledged and shaped and mentored me, to understand that self-awareness is really important to have, so that you can have wisdom and support when you're working with TCKs. And so it starts with you. And then I think it's also important for TCKs to understand their communities, both virtually and in person. There's many touch points, right? There's school communities, there's clubs, there's sometimes faith-based communities that TCKs are involved with. So encourage them to understand where they're getting nurtured, who is validating them, and who is safe for them, because TCKs need to be aware that they're part of a larger story. And the way to do this is to understand who are they hanging out with, where are they getting mentored. And so I think it's really also important for TCKs to have mentors, people who have walked in their shoes before, and really understand that it's the both and, again, not to minimize, not to downplay, but to affirm and to acknowledge and validate that the growing up overseas, it's the both and. Oh, I just my light just went off. But that's those are the main points of what I wanted to cover today about naming, normalizing, and networking in the TCK space. And again, not shying away from having these conversations, but really celebrating that even Trova.Health is a community of care that will encourage healthy relationships, healthy adjustments, and that really understanding that well-being is not just emotional or mental, it's also the physical, the spiritual, the social compositions of who we are. So at this point, I'd love to address any questions or comments from the attendees, and want to thank Dana for this opportunity to share.
My pleasure. I have a question, and then there's some already in, and please, for those who haven't, feel free to send in a question through the Q&A or the chat. One of the things that I noticed that you mentioned several times is that for third culture kids and kids who are moving abroad and transitioning, that they need to feel, and you mentioned it several times throughout, something to the fact that they're not unique in their experience, that there are others like them. that they're part of a larger story. You just said that. Why is this so important for these third culture kids to feel? Are they feeling isolated in their experiences? Why is this so important for them to understand that there are many others like them?
Yeah, great question. And it has to do with really the identity piece and the belonging piece when it comes to who am I? If there's the sense that everything around me changes and I adapt all the time, then who am I as a person? How do I relate to others? And so having that shared understanding of I'm not terminally unique, that yes, I can connect with people beyond my TCK-ness. And again, understanding that this is why having those hobbies and skills are important to cultivate, because they can connect on that way and not necessarily on geography or on the TCK profile. I think it's really important for families, for parents, for extended family to understand what doesn't change based upon location. So is it a family tradition that you have, or something you celebrate everywhere, wherever you are, because that will help a TCK to understand, oh, this is my heritage and this is who I am. This will link me to my passport country. This will help me understand what values are important in my passport country. And it might not necessarily be such a culture shock if they go back for university, or even have, go back in their childhood or teen years.
Yeah. Yeah, super interesting. And I think you have already touched on this, but one of the questions that people are wondering is, how do you find for your kids, how do you help them cultivate rootedness or connection if they're transitioning? And you just mentioned developing traditions, family traditions, even no matter what country in, as an example. Or what are the other things that people can do to have your kid feel rooted, even though they're transitioning?
Yeah, that's certainly something to consider as a family, talking through, this is our family value, and this is who we are, no matter where we are in the world. I think it's also important to have the conversation, open the conversation of who do they think they are? Where are they from? I think that some TCKs internalize the message that I don't fit in anywhere, or I need to keep moving. I know that even in my own journey, I had this internal clock of like, tick, 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 I must move. And how do you satiate that in more maybe healthy and reasonable ways into adulthood? You don't need to uproot and move your whole life, but find different ways that you can change, not in such drastic ways. So really encouraging TCKs that it doesn't need to be a pattern. Sometimes it's a very unhealthy coping mechanism if you are letting your TCK-ness control your decisions.
Yeah, that's interesting that it can reach into adult life. I mean, I grew up in one place in northern Canada, but then early in my teen years, we moved. So I moved during high school, which is a pretty hard time. We moved countries during high school, which is a pretty hard time to move. And then since then, I've never lived in anywhere for more than 4 years. So I think I'm suffering from what you just described, and maybe some of the others on the call feel the same way. So another question that's come in, and again, please feel free to ask questions of Megan. So when the kids are, with us, whether we're their parent or their teacher, they're not always very communicative. It's hard, even if a kid is growing up in their own environment, to get them to talk or to tell you how they're feeling. And you mentioned that it's important to have kids normalize that they're not okay, because I am not okay sometimes, or whatever the case is. And so if they're not talking about it, What are some other signs that parents can or caretakers can see in their kids if they're needing more support than just their day-to-day or what the family is offering?
Mhm. Yeah. I especially with teens, I mean, parents are like, they just stay in their room all day, like I don't know what they're thinking. Or they'll just say, I don't like you. And I'm like, well, that's actually a good thing. They're actually talking to you. That
You
means they
take what you
trust
can
you.
get.
Yeah. So one way that's like, I think I'm going to take it in two parts. One framework I use sometimes is, and it comes from like intercultural work, is you describe first, you interpret, and then you evaluate. So first you can describe, like, I've noticed, you're doing this, or I see you doing this, or I hear you playing this music, or so it's really you taking that initiative to describe that you see them, you hear them, but don't make assumptions you understand them yet. So first describe the behavior, and then you interpret it. You can say, like, I sense, or I feel, or I think. So you're interpreting what it looks like to you, and then being very, again, inviting into a collaborative space of not like judging or saying like, I don't like that, or you need to stop that now. And then evaluating would be, I'd like us to talk about this behavior. I'd like to talk about, let's go for a walk. Let's go for ice cream. So I think it's really in that way, when you want to support TCKs, is to start from a place of curiosity, and inviting the conversation. When you need extra support, that's so tricky, because I have some teens who are like, yeah, I switch my interests every day. My music tastes, they change, or I tried the flute and I don't want to do that anymore. So sometimes when I hear people say like, oh yeah, cultivate that skill, or keep that consistent, I mean, it can be developmentally that stage where they do want to just test out different things or get bored easily. So making that distinction, is it that they're still curious about different things, or is it becoming like a numbing depression, like nothing interests me, nothing makes me feel alive? So that's where I think additional mental and emotional support and other professional support needs to come in, when it's that routine of really depression and anxiety. Another intervention that needs to happen is when I think teens especially can't self-regulate, when none of their tries to help them get into a routine, or their texting friends doesn't help them get into a better mood, or nothing calms them down. I think that's also indicators that perhaps you need to get another mentor in, or talk to the school counselor. But also, I think it's really important to understand where they are in the transition period, because transition to a new country, like the first 6 months is just wildly chaotic for everybody, and you're trying to find your ground. You're trying to find, what the norm is. And so not jumping to conclusion, like, 1 month in, that everyone's doomed to not adjust, but holding space and grace for each other. Again, like not putting so much expectation on them. So those are a couple things that come to mind. One other thing that just popped into mind was, I see this a lot with TCK teens. They say that there's this idea of what is success, and this expectation of how to achieve that, what that looks like. And so breaking that down, asking what is your definition of success? What is your definition of failure? Because that can be really feeding into anxiety if they're holding this expectation that nobody around them is holding for them. And so creating that conversation of enjoy being a kid, enjoy being a teen, and don't grow up so fast. So lean into that.
So one of the follow-up questions was, are there differences between how teens and younger kids might display the same type of depression or anxiety, or do teens feel it more because of their need for connection than younger kids do?
I think it depends. It really depends. And I think that would be a really good question for someone with more of the medical and psychological background and training. I do explore the socio-emotional pieces of the TCK profile, but I think that's very contextualized with where they are, who the family is, how many moves they've had. And but one thing I think is really important for all TCKs is that they have TCK friends and monocultural or non-TCK friends, like to really cultivate both. Don't have just one or another, to develop those relationships with family and friends who don't move a lot.
Yep. Yeah, and Alicia makes a good point that everyone needs to feel a sense of belonging, and that's true. From young kid up through the adults who are interacting with them, because that's it's human nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And more research is done on what parts of our brain feels pain when we don't have a sense of belonging and when connection is cut off. And I just read a report recently that the same part of your brain that experiences, like when you break a limb or break a leg, it's the same part of the brain that feels pain when you have a loss of connection with somebody. And so that's powerful, right? That's human nature. Like, we need to honor that in our body, that yeah, it's like breaking a bone if we don't have good goodbyes and good hellos.
Yeah. Yeah, and like a broken bone, it can heal and be repaired. So even if, like, parents often feel guilty when they take their kids and move them to the next place, but if it sounds to me like if it's done with these network naming and normalizing, that you can actually, it can still be positive despite the transition.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm a huge advocate for having the globally mobile upbringing. I think more so we're seeing more diverse communities, right? We don't have to go far. We don't have to go abroad. It's our communities that you have those cross-cultural experiences. And increasingly, I think it's us, it's the Trova.Health network, it's our participants, our attendees here who have those experiences and skill sets. So really championing those benefits, that's really important.
Great. We have another question that came in. Can you name a few of the groups or chats that third culture kids can connect to help mentor and guide them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's exciting. Again, I mentioned Trova.Health as a community of care. That's how I frame it. And so there are different people who can mentor, who can guide, who can provide that support. Families in Global Transition is another organization that I recommend, who have a lot of expat or globally minded, globally mobile people. who can connect and mentor. On Instagram, if you're looking for very TCK specific, TCK Global is a really great community. It's more like peer mentoring, not necessarily professional mentoring, but I think there's so much power in peer mentoring. And then finally, there are some organizations like, I would say Kaleidoscope, I would say TCK Training, that offer different workshops, different ways for TCKs to connect in that way. But also I love to mentor, so connect with me as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I put in the chat to answer that question, the Families in Global Transition, in their link there, and then also Megan's direct link that you can book a session with her. And Megan, you help both the parental or the mentor or the teacher side of it, as well as the youth. Is that right? You can do both?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Great. So definitely you can find her there. And I mean, as you've seen, Megan is full of a lot of personal experience that translates into with her master's degree, double master's, maybe even, of knowledge and support on the professional side. Can be a great influence both for yourselves and for your kids and teens. So definitely recommend speaking to Megan. As I said, the link is in the chat. That is our time. So I want to be respectful of everyone. Thank you so much. It's amazing to bring people from around the world together. Glad that we have the technology to do it. And Trova.Health is here to help. So please let other people know we're a new company that is focused on people living abroad, and we have lots of resources and are here to help everybody. Have a great night. The recording will be sent out so you can share it with others as well. And thank you so much, Megan, for teaching us more about how to help our kids.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.